Zuri had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and when she finally held her newborn son, Kito, in her arms, she felt like the happiest woman in the world. The hospital room was filled with the soft cries of the baby, and tears of joy welled up in her eyes as she looked at her husband, Ayotunde. He stood beside her, his face glowing with happiness as he gently touched Kito's tiny fingers. "He's perfect, Zuri," Ayotunde whispered, his voice filled with love. Zuri smiled, feeling her heart swell with emotions. She had waited for this moment her entire life. She had dreamed of building a happy family with Ayotunde, where love and warmth filled every corner of their home. But as she looked around the room, her gaze landed on Adama, Ayotunde's mother, standing near the door. Unlike everyone else who had congratulated them, she remained silent, her face stiff and unreadable. Adama was a wealthy and powerful woman, known for her strong opinions and controlling nature. She had never truly accepted Zuri as her son's wife, believing that Ayotunde deserved someone more suitable. To her, Zuri, a schoolteacher from a humble background, was not good enough for their prestigious family. And now, as she looked at Kito, her expression was not one of joy, but of quiet disapproval. "He is a strong boy," Adama finally said, her voice cool and distant. "Let's just hope his mother can raise him properly." Zuri's heart sank. Even on the happiest day of her life, Adama found a way to make her feel small, but she refused to let her mother-in-law's words ruin this moment. She held Kito closer, silently promising him that no matter what happened, she would always be there for him. She would love and protect him with all her heart. As Ayotunde and the nurses continued fussing over the baby, Adama walked closer, her eyes studying Zuri carefully. There was something unsettling about the way she looked at them, as if she was already planning something. Zuri couldn't shake off the feeling that this was just the beginning of a battle she wasn't prepared for. But at that moment, none of that mattered. All she wanted was to hold her son and cherish this perfect, fleeting moment of happiness. Little did she know, this joy would soon be stolen from her in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. From the moment Kito was born, Zuri knew that being a mother would not be easy, but she never expected her biggest challenge to come from her own mother-in-law, Adama. Adama was not just any woman. She was powerful, wealthy, and used to getting her way. She had spent years controlling her son, Ayotunde, and now she had turned her attention to Zuri and Kito. At first, Adama's words were subtle. She would smile politely and say things like, "Motherhood is difficult, Zuri. Not everyone is born with the skills to do it well." But as time passed, her comments became sharper. She criticized everything: how Zuri held Kito, how she fed him, even the way she spoke to him. "You're too soft with him," Adama would say, shaking her head. "Boys need to be raised with discipline, not just love. If you spoil him, he will grow up weak." No matter how hard Zuri tried, it was never enough for Adama. If Kito cried, she would sigh and say, "A real mother knows how to calm her baby." If Zuri rocked him to sleep, Adama would mutter, "You're doing it wrong." Even when Zuri spent hours making special baby food, Adama would push the bowl aside and say, "That's not the right nutrition for a growing boy. He needs real food." Zuri wanted to believe that Adama was just being protective, but deep down, she knew the truth. Adama did not think she was good enough to raise Kito. And worse, Adama truly believed that Kito would be better off under her care. One afternoon, as Zuri was playing with Kito, Adama sat across from her and spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Zuri, raising a child is not a simple thing. It requires strength, wisdom, and experience. You are young and you have a lot to learn. Perhaps it would be best if I took more responsibility for Kito's upbringing." Zuri's heart pounded. She looked at Ayotunde, hoping he would defend her, but he remained silent. She felt her hands tighten around Kito's tiny body as fear crept into her heart. Was Adama really suggesting taking her son away? "I am his mother," Zuri said firmly, forcing herself to stay calm. "I know how to take care of my own child." Adama simply smiled, a knowing, almost condescending smile. "We'll see," she said, before standing up and walking away. That night, as Zuri lay in bed, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning. Adama was not a woman who gave up easily, and Zuri had a terrible feeling that she was planning something far worse. It was a quiet night, with only the soft hum of the wind outside. The house was peaceful, and for the first time in weeks, Zuri felt at ease. Kito had finally fallen asleep after a long evening of fussing, and she lay beside Ayotunde, exhausted but content. She reached over and placed her hand on his, whispering, "Our son is growing so fast." Ayotunde simply nodded, barely looking up from his phone. Zuri sighed, pushing away the feeling that something was off. She was too tired to think about it. Within minutes, sleep took over. A sudden chill woke her up in the middle of the night. Something felt wrong. The air in the room was too still, too silent. She turned over and glanced at the crib beside their bed. Her heart stopped. The crib was empty. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Maybe Ayotunde had taken Kito for a late-night walk around the house. Maybe the baby had shifted beneath the blankets, making it look like he wasn't there. But when she reached into the crib, all she felt was cold sheets. Kito was gone. Panic shot through her body like lightning. "Ayotunde!" she screamed, shaking him awake. "Kito is missing!" He blinked groggily, rubbing his eyes. Instead of the panic she expected, his face remained calm, almost too calm. "What do you mean? Are you sure?" "Of course, I'm sure." Zuri's voice trembled as she stumbled out of bed, frantically searching the room. The door was locked from the inside. The windows were shut. There was no sign of forced entry. It was as if Kito had vanished into thin air. Her heart pounded as she ran out of the bedroom, calling his name. She searched every corner of the house, checking under the furniture, behind doors, even inside the kitchen cabinets, anywhere a child could be. But deep inside, she knew Kito wasn't just hiding. Someone had taken him. Desperate, she rushed to Adama's room, hoping, praying that her mother-in-law might have some answers. She threw the door open without knocking, her breath coming in short gasps. Adama was sitting on the edge of her bed, already awake, her expression unreadable. It was as if she'd been expecting this moment. "Kito is gone," Zuri cried, her voice breaking. Adama didn't react the way she should have. There was no shock, no concern. She simply tilted her head slightly and said in a calm voice, "Are you sure he didn't just wander off?" Zuri felt like the walls were closing in. Something wasn't right. Ayotunde wasn't panicking. Adama wasn't surprised. It was almost as if they knew this would happen. Tears blurred Zuri's vision as the realization hit her like a punch to the chest. This wasn't a random disappearance. This wasn't an accident. Someone had taken her baby, and deep down, she had a terrible feeling she knew exactly who was responsible. Zuri felt like she was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Every morning, she opened her eyes and hoped that it had all been a terrible dream, that Kito was still in his crib, sleeping peacefully. But every morning, reality hit her like a storm. The crib was empty. Her baby was gone. Days turned into weeks. But Zuri refused to accept it. She searched everywhere, knocking on doors, asking neighbors if they had seen anything. She walked through the streets of their town, holding up a picture of Kito, begging strangers for help. She went to the police station every single day, demanding answers. But they had none. There were no witnesses, no evidence, no ransom note. It was as if Kito had disappeared into thin air. "A baby doesn't just vanish!" Zuri screamed at the officer in charge one evening. Her voice was hoarse from crying, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. The officer sighed, his face full of pity. "We're doing our best, ma'am, but with no leads. There's only so much we can do." That wasn't good enough. Nothing was ever going to be enough until she had her son back in her arms. At home, everything reminded her of Kito. His tiny clothes still hung in the wardrobe. His toys were scattered across the floor, untouched. She would sit in his room for hours, clutching his favorite blanket, inhaling the faint scent that was slowly fading. Ayotunde, instead of comforting her, became more distant. At first, he had shown some concern, but as time passed, his patience wore thin. "You need to move on, Zuri," he said one night, his voice cold. "Crying every day won't bring him back." Zuri stared at him in disbelief. "Move on?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Our son is missing, and you want me to move on?" But Ayotunde didn't understand her pain. Or maybe he didn't want to. He stopped coming home early, spending more time at work or somewhere else. Zuri didn't care anymore. The only thing that mattered was Kito. The worst part was Adama. She didn't grieve. She didn't cry. Instead, she acted as if nothing had happened. Whenever Zuri broke down, Adama would simply shake her head and say, "Crying will not change anything. Maybe this was fate." Fate? How could a mother believe that losing her grandchild was fate? Zuri's instinct screamed at her that Adama knew more than she was saying. But without proof, what could she do? Slowly, the days blurred together. She barely ate, barely slept. Her once bright and happy life had turned into an endless cycle of pain. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kito's tiny face, his chubby hands reaching for her, his laughter echoing in her ears. But now there was only silence, and it was killing her. Months passed, but for Zuri, time had completely stopped. Every day felt the same, empty, dark, and full of pain. She refused to give up hope. She kept searching, asking questions, and begging the police to keep looking for Kito. But no matter how much she tried, she felt like she was the only one who still cared. Ayotunde had changed. At first, he pretended to care, but as time went on, he stopped asking about the investigation. He no longer sat with her at night, holding her hand while she cried. Instead, he spent more time outside the house, coming home late. And when he was home, he barely spoke to her. One evening, as Zuri sat in Kito's empty room, holding his tiny blanket, Ayotunde walked in. His face was cold, distant, like a stranger. "Zuri," he said quietly, "you need to stop this." She looked up at him, confused. "Stop what?" "This obsession," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Kito is gone, Zuri. You have to move on." Her heart shattered. "Move on?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How can you even say that? He's our son." But Ayotunde didn't flinch. His eyes held no sadness, no guilt, just exhaustion. "I can't do this anymore," he said, living in a house filled with grief, living with a woman who refuses to accept reality. Zuri felt like the ground beneath her was crumbling. "You think I want to live like this? You think I choose this pain?" But Ayotunde had already made up his mind. Days later, he handed her divorce papers. "It's for the best," he said coldly. "We can't keep living like this." Zuri stared at the papers, unable to breathe. After everything they had been through, after all the love they had shared, he was leaving her. He was giving up. But the worst betrayal came when she realized where he was going. Ayotunde had sided with his mother. Instead of standing by his wife, he returned to the woman who had never accepted Zuri, the woman who had acted strangely calm when Kito disappeared. Zuri felt completely abandoned. Her husband had chosen to walk away. Her mother-in-law looked at her with silent victory, and the world kept moving as if nothing had happened. She was left alone in a house that no longer felt like a home, surrounded by memories of the son she had lost and the husband who had betrayed her. She had never felt so broken, but deep inside, a fire was starting to burn. She might have lost everything, but one thing was certain. She was not done fighting. Zuri left everything behind. The house where she had dreamed of raising Kito, the city where she had once been happy, the husband who had betrayed her. With nothing but a small suitcase and a heart full of pain, she moved to Lagos, hoping for a fresh start. But starting over was not easy. Lagos was loud, fast, and unforgiving. The streets were filled with people rushing to their destinations, their faces blank with the weight of their own struggles. Zuri felt like a ghost, wandering through the city, trying to find a place where she belonged. She found a small, one-room apartment in a crowded neighborhood. It was nothing like her old home, but at least it had a roof and a door she could lock. She got a job as a waitress in a local restaurant, spending long hours on her feet, serving food to strangers while her own stomach remained empty most nights. Money was always a problem. Some days, she barely had enough to eat. Other days, she had to choose between paying rent and keeping the electricity on. But no matter how hard things got, she never stopped searching for Kito. Every spare moment, she visited police stations, orphanages, and children's shelters, asking if anyone had seen a boy who matched Kito's description. She posted flyers on street corners, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone would recognize him. People told her to move on. "It's been years, Zuri," they said. "Maybe it's time to let go." But she couldn't. How could a mother ever let go of her child? Loneliness became her only companion. The nights were the hardest. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where Kito was. Was he safe? Did he remember her? Did he even know she existed? There were moments when she almost broke, when the pain became too much to bear, when she sat in the darkness, holding Kito's old blanket, whispering his name over and over again. But every time she reached the edge of despair, something inside her refused to give up. She had lost her home. She had lost her husband. But she would not lose her son forever. No matter how many years passed, no matter how many obstacles stood in her way, she would find him. One day, somehow, she would bring Kito back home. It had been over 10 years since Kito disappeared, but not a single day passed without Zuri thinking of him. She had learned to survive, to push through the pain, but deep inside, she was still that grieving mother, searching for her lost child. One afternoon, after a long day of work, she stopped by the market to buy some vegetables. The market was crowded, filled with the usual noise, vendors shouting, customers bargaining, the smell of grilled corn and spices filling the air. She moved through the stalls absent-mindedly, lost in her thoughts. Then, she saw him, a teenage boy, tall and lean, walking past her with a group of friends. Zuri's heart stopped, her breath caught in her throat. He looked exactly like Kito. For a moment, she thought she was imagining it. Maybe her mind was playing tricks on her again, just like all those times she had mistaken a stranger's face for her son's. But this time, it was different. This boy had Kito's eyes, the same deep brown, filled with something familiar, the shape of his nose, the curve of his lips. It was him. Her hands started shaking. She wanted to call out his name, but the words wouldn't come. What if she was wrong? What if she scared him? What if he didn't remember her? The boy laughed at something his friend said, his voice ringing through the air like an echo from the past. Tears filled Zuri's eyes. It had been so long since she had heard Kito's laughter, and yet it felt like no time had passed at all. He turned to walk away, and panic surged through her. She couldn't let him disappear again, not this time. Without thinking, she rushed forward, pushing through the crowd. "Wait!" she called, her voice trembling. But the boy didn't hear her. He was moving too fast. Desperate, Zuri started running, ignoring the strange looks from the people around her. She couldn't lose him. Not again. Her heart pounded as she followed him through the market, weaving between stalls, pushing past people. Finally, just as he was about to disappear around a corner, she reached out and grabbed his arm. The boy turned, surprised, his eyes meeting hers. Zuri's breath caught in her throat. Up close, there was no doubt. "Kito," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The boy frowned, confused. He pulled his arm away gently. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Do I know you?" Zuri felt the world tilt beneath her feet. He didn't recognize her. He didn't know who she was. Her son was standing right in front of her, but to him, she was just a stranger. Zuri couldn't believe what had just happened. The boy she had just met, who looked so much like Kito, had no memory of her, and the pain of that moment still stung. But something inside her told her she had to learn more. This couldn't be a coincidence. There had to be more to the story. Determined, Zuri followed the boy from the market, keeping a safe distance as he walked down the busy streets. He didn't seem to notice her, and soon, he took a turn onto a quieter road, leading her to an area she knew well. To her shock, he entered a large gated estate, one that looked far more luxurious than any place Zuri could afford. The gates were tall, made of iron and gold, and the house inside was a sprawling mansion, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. It was the kind of place that only the rich and powerful could afford. Zuri's heart raced as she stood outside the gates, staring at the mansion in disbelief. Could this be where Kito had been all these years? Her mind screamed in panic, but she forced herself to think clearly. She needed answers. The next few days, Zuri returned to the area. She would wait until the boy left for school or somewhere else, and then she'd approach the estate, trying to find any clue that could confirm what she suspected. One afternoon, as she walked past the gates again, she saw a familiar face, Adama. Zuri froze in place, her blood running cold. There was no doubt now. This was where Kito had been all these years. Adama had something to do with it. Zuri didn't waste any more time. She began to dig deeper. She visited neighbors and people who worked in the area, asking discreet questions. It didn't take long for the pieces of the puzzle to start falling into place. It turned out that Adama had been living in this estate for the past decade, ever since Quito disappeared. She had been seen around the neighborhood, always looking calm, always keeping to herself. But Zuri wasn't fooled. Adama had always been controlling, always had a way of getting what she wanted. And now, it was clear that she had taken Quito all those years ago. Zuri kept searching, asking questions, and slowly, she uncovered the terrifying truth. Adama had hired people to take Quito that night. She had planned everything, the disappearance, the lies, and the years of silence. She had stolen Zuri's son and raised him as her own, all while hiding in plain sight. The more Zuri uncovered, the angrier she became. She had been lied to, manipulated, and left to suffer, while Adama lived in luxury with the child she had stolen. But the worst part, Ayatunde had known. He had helped his mother, believing that Quito would have a better life with her. Zuri couldn't believe what she was hearing. The truth was more painful than she had imagined, but now she knew what she had to do. She would not stop until she had Quito back. The fight for her son was far from over, and she was ready to expose everything. Zuri's heart pounded in her chest as she stood outside Adama's mansion. Everything inside her screamed to turn away, but she couldn't. She had spent years searching for Quito, and now she was so close to the truth. There was no turning back. With a deep breath, Zuri pushed open the large gates and walked up to the front door. Her hands were trembling, but her determination was stronger than the fear. She had to know why Adama had taken her son. She had to hear the truth from her own mouth. The door opened, and there stood Adama, her face as calm and cold as ever. "Zuri, what are you doing here?" Adama asked, her voice as sharp as ever. Zuri didn't hesitate. "I know everything. I know what you did." Her voice shook with anger, but she refused to back down. Adama's eyes flickered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, stepping aside to let Zuri inside. "Come in then, if you're so eager to talk." Zuri stormed into the house, her eyes scanning the lavish surroundings. The grand staircase, the expensive furniture, and the quiet luxury. Everything about this place made her blood boil. This was the life Adama had stolen from her. "Where is he?" Zuri demanded. "Where is my son?" Adama gave a small, cold smile. "Your son, Zuri. I did what was best for him. He's better off here than with you." Zuri's eyes narrowed. "Better off? You took him from me, Adama. You made sure I suffered while you raised him as your own." Adama crossed her arms, her expression one of calm superiority. "I gave him a life of privilege. I gave him a future you were too poor and broken to give him." Zuri's heart felt like it was breaking all over again. The truth was worse than she had imagined, but she wasn't done yet. "You don't get to decide what's best for my son," Zuri shouted. "He's my child. You took him from me, and I want him back." At that moment, a voice interrupted them. "What's going on here?" Zuri froze. She turned to see the teenage boy she had seen in the market, Quito. But now, he was older, a teenager, and his face was different. He was dressed in expensive clothes, his hair styled perfectly, and his eyes were full of confusion as he looked between the two women. Zuri's heart stopped. "Quito," she whispered, her voice breaking. The boy looked at her with no recognition in his eyes. "Who are you? And why are you yelling at my grandmother?" Zuri's chest tightened. "I'm your mother, Quito. Or I should say, Durojaye, right?" The boy's face changed as the name hit him. Adama quickly stepped in, her calmness fading. "No, Durojaye, don't listen to her. She's lying." But Durojaye looked between his grandmother and Zuri, slowly starting to piece things together. His eyes widened as the truth began to sink in. "What is she talking about, Grandma?" Adama's face twisted with anger. "You don't understand, Durojaye. I saved you from that woman." Durojaye stepped back, looking at Adama, then at Zuri. The confusion in his eyes slowly turned to horror as the pieces finally clicked into place. You took me from her?" he asked, his voice trembling. Adama's mask of control shattered for a moment, and for the first time, Zuri saw her mother-in-law truly afraid. But it was too late. Durojaye now knew the truth. Tears filled Zuri's eyes as she reached out to him, her voice soft but full of emotion. "Durojaye, you're my son. I never stopped looking for you. The boy stood there, torn between the life he had known and the shocking truth that had just been revealed. But deep inside, Zuri knew that no matter how painful this moment was, it was the first step to bringing her son home. Zuri couldn't believe what had just happened. She had finally found Kito, but her journey wasn't over. Now, she had to fight for him. She couldn't let Adama's lies and manipulations steal away the happiness she deserved with her son. Determined to bring Kito home, Zuri contacted a lawyer. She knew the battle ahead would be tough, but she was ready to face whatever it took. She gathered evidence, testimonies, and everything she could find that proved Adama had orchestrated Kito's kidnapping. The more she dug, the clearer it became. Adama had stolen her son, and it was time for her to pay for it. Zuri wasn't alone in this fight. News about the case spread quickly, and the public began to take notice. The story of a mother who had been robbed of her child and fought for years to find him touched the hearts of many. People from all walks of life began to support Zuri, offering her words of encouragement, donations for legal fees, and even sharing her story on social media. The case quickly gained media attention. Reporters followed every development, eager to share the shocking details of Adama's crimes. As the truth came to light, the public's outrage grew. How could someone so wealthy and powerful kidnap a child and get away with it for so long? Zuri's lawyer worked tirelessly to build a strong case. They interviewed witnesses who had seen Adama's strange behavior over the years, and even found people who had heard Adama boast about how she had taken Kito away from Zuri. Slowly but surely, the truth about Adama's actions began to unfold in front of everyone. For Zuri, every day was a mix of hope and fear. Hope that justice would be served, and fear that Adama might find a way to escape punishment. But Zuri refused to give up. She knew that if she didn't stand up for Kito now, she would lose him forever. As the court case went on, Zuri's determination only grew stronger. She had already lost so much, but she wasn't about to let Adama take away her chance to finally be with her son. The fight for justice was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for the future she had always dreamed of with Kito. The whole world was watching, and Zuri knew that the truth would win in the end. She was ready to take on whatever came next, because this time, she wouldn't let anyone take her son away again. As Zuri's case gained momentum, the weight of the truth became too heavy for Adama to bear. The evidence against her was undeniable, and the public's anger grew stronger every day. Once respected and feared in her community, Adama's name began to fall apart. People who had once admired her now turned their backs. Her wealth and power were no longer enough to protect her from the consequences of her actions. The once grand mansion she had lived in for years was seized. Her businesses, built on lies and manipulation, were now being investigated. With every passing day, more of her secrets were exposed, and her reputation crumbled. The high society that had once welcomed her now shunned her. The truth was too much for them to ignore. Adama had lost everything she had worked so hard to control, but the most painful loss of all came when Kito, now known as Durojaye, finally saw her for who she really was. The young boy she had raised was no longer the same child who had lived under her roof. He had learned everything about Zuri, about Adama's cruelty, about the lies that had kept him away from his real mother. Durojaye, torn and heartbroken, stood in front of Adama one day, his voice trembling with rage. "You lied to me. You stole me from my mother, from my real family." Adama's face twisted with anger. But Durojaye was no longer afraid of her. He had learned the truth, and it was too late for her to fix what she had broken. He turned his back on her, walking out of her life forever. But the damage didn't stop there. Ayotunde, Zuri's ex-husband, also faced the consequences of his actions. He had stood by his mother for years, allowing her to take their child away, believing she was doing what was best. But now, the world saw him for what he was. A man who had betrayed his wife and son. Ayotunde's social life was shattered. Once the proud son of a wealthy woman, he was now seen as weak and complicit in Adama's crimes. His friends and business partners distanced themselves from him, and rumors about his role in the kidnapping spread quickly. He also faced legal consequences, as his involvement in the crime became impossible to ignore. The consequences were clear. Adama had lost her fortune, her influence, and the one thing that truly mattered, her son. Ayotunde had lost his family and his reputation, and most painful of all, Kito had rejected them both. For Zuri, the battle wasn't over yet, but she could feel a sense of justice settling into her heart. Adama and Ayotunde had paid a price for their actions, and the truth had finally come to light. After years of searching, suffering, and fighting, the day Zuri had dreamed of finally came. She stood in the courtroom, her heart racing as the judge declared that she had won the case. The long battle for her son was over, and Kito, now Durajaye, was finally coming home with her. The moment Zuri held Kito in her arms again, she could hardly believe it. He was taller now, a teenager with his own thoughts and memories, but in his eyes, she could still see the boy she had lost. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "I never stopped loving you, my son." But even though they were reunited, it wasn't easy. Kito had spent so many years with Adama, and the pain of those years couldn't be erased overnight. There was so much to rebuild: trust, love, and understanding. Kito had questions, and Zuri had answers, but they needed time to heal together. The first few weeks were difficult. Kito was still adjusting to the idea of a mother who had fought so hard for him, and Zuri had to learn how to be a mother to a boy who had grown into a young man without her. They both had to forgive, both themselves and each other. But little by little, they began to rebuild their bond, one step at a time. Zuri was patient, never rushing him, allowing him to come to terms with the pain he had endured. She showed him the love she had always held for him, never letting go of the hope that one day they would be whole again. And in time, Kito began to soften. He started to see her not as a stranger, but as the mother who had fought to bring him home. As they spent more time together, they found joy in the small moments, laughing at old memories, sharing meals, and talking about everything they had missed. Slowly but surely, the bond between mother and son grew stronger than ever. Zuri knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. They both had a past full of pain to heal from, but the future was theirs to build. For the first time in years, Zuri felt at peace. The shadows of the past were finally behind them, and together, she and Kito would write a new story, one filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. Zuri had fought for her son, and in the end, love had won.